What if one of the greatest empires in history never collapsed? Imagine a world where Roman roads stretch uninterrupted from Britannia to the Euphrates, where Latin is the global lingua franca, gladiators still thrill crowds in colosseums, and technology, law, and infrastructure advanced centuries ahead of schedule. Welcome to a thought experiment that rewrites the last 1,500 years of human history. This is not just history, this is alternate reality. What if Rome never fell? At its height, the Roman Empire was a marvel of political structure, engineering, and cultural integration. Stretching from northern Africa to the British Isles, it boasted aqueducts, paved roads, public sanitation, and a legal system that still influences modern jurisprudence. The Roman military was one of the most disciplined in history, capable of conquering and holding vast territories. Roman engineers developed revolutionary construction techniques, from concrete to domes and arches. Its cities had public baths, theaters, libraries, and multi-story buildings. In many ways, Rome wasn't just a political power, it was a civilizational engine. The empire's governance structure included the Senate, magistrates, and eventually emperors, whose power ranged from benevolent philosopher kings like Marcus Aurelius to tyrants like Nero. Citizenship evolved from a privilege of Italian elites to a status granted across continents, uniting diverse peoples under one legal and cultural framework. But by 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire fell. Corruption, inflation, overextension, military defeats, and the growing power of invading tribes like the Visigoths, Huns, and Vandals led to its slow disintegration. The Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, endured until 1453, but had lost much of the West's might and cohesion. The consequences were profound. Western Europe fragmented, roads decayed, knowledge was lost, trade diminished, and institutions crumbled. The power vacuum gave rise to feudalism, and much of classical knowledge was buried under centuries of instability. The so-called Dark Ages weren't void of culture or progress, but they lacked the unified momentum Rome once commanded. But let's imagine a different outcome. Suppose the Western Empire never fell. Instead, through a combination of luck, leadership, and reform, it endured, transforming rather than collapsing. Let's explore a world where Rome survives into the modern era. In this alternate timeline, we will explore the enduring strength of Rome through 6 dramatic narrative arcs: the mounting conflict that nearly destroyed it, the rising action of its improbable survival, a climax of global transformation, the falling action of new trials in a Roman-led world, and the resolution of a new kind of empire. To explore a Rome that never fell, we must address its greatest enemies. Internally, Rome struggled with political corruption, economic inflation, over-reliance on slave labor, and a widening gap between the rich and poor. Emperors rose and fell rapidly, some assassinated, others ineffectual. Meanwhile, the massive military budget drained the economy. Externally, Rome faced waves of barbarian tribes, Visigoths, Vandals, Huns. These groups didn't just attack, they migrated into Roman lands, eroding its borders and loyalty. Plagues swept through the empire. And then there was Christianity, which, while eventually adopted, changed the empire's cultural and political landscape forever. So in our alternate timeline, how does Rome survive? Let's say a series of strong, visionary emperors, like a reformed Marcus Aurelius or a militarily brilliant successor to Constantine, recognize the signs of decay. They implement sweeping reforms, land redistribution, bureaucratic checks, professionalized military systems, and expanded citizenship. A centralized education system bolsters civic identity. The state reduces reliance on slavery, instead developing a system of paid labor and technological innovation. In this world, the empire begins to resemble a proto-industrial society by the 8th century, centuries before our real-world industrial revolution. With stability restored, Rome begins to flourish again. Advances in medicine, science, and engineering are accelerated. Roman universities become centers of global learning, rivaling anything from our real-world enlightenment. Imagine Da Vinci, born 500 years earlier, building flying machines under a Roman patronage system. The empire expands, not through war, but through alliances and economic integration. A Roman-led trade network spans the globe. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, all flowing into the marble forums of Roman cities. The Renaissance never needs a rebirth because classical knowledge was never lost. Instead, Rome becomes a technological powerhouse, inventing steam engines, mechanical tools, and early computers far earlier. With efficient roads and sea routes, travel is safe, fast, and state-sponsored. Religions coexist under Roman law, with a pantheon of beliefs tolerated so long as they uphold civic duty. Christianity evolves as a unifying ideology, but without the destructive schisms of the real-world church. Roman values of reason, debate, and duty become global norms. Rome becomes not just an empire, but a civilization model for the planet. By the 1500s in this timeline, Rome is a planetary superpower. North America is discovered earlier, perhaps by Roman explorers, who established colonies governed not by private companies or monarchs, but but by senatorial provinces. Indigenous cultures are engaged diplomatically and scientifically, leading to a more integrated global culture. Industrialization kicks off in the 13th century. Steam-powered machinery drives production. Roman scientists explore anatomy, astronomy, and physics at levels our timeline wouldn't reach until Newton or Galileo. Rome establishes planetary infrastructure, transcontinental rail systems, early electricity grids, sanitation projects that prevent pandemics, and aqueducts that rival even modern dams. Latin is still the universal language of education, law, and science. Rome also leads in ethics. Slavery is abolished by the 10th century. Gender roles evolve as Roman law codifies equal citizenship rights. Education is mandatory and free, with public institutions training orators, engineers, and physicians across continents. In this world, the Enlightenment isn't a moment, it's a continuous state. Rome is not just a power, it is the world. Yet even an eternal Rome is not free from challenges. Over time, questions emerge. Can a centralized power this massive avoid stagnation? How do regional identities survive under a monolithic culture? What happens when technology begins to replace jobs faster than citizens can retrain? Climate change becomes a concern by the 19th century. Rome, with its vast infrastructure and scientific community, begins global environmental planning centuries ahead of us. But political disagreements arise. Provinces in distant lands push for more autonomy. Senators debate AI governance, space colonization, and bioethics in a world where science has outpaced moral clarity. The sheer scale of Rome tests its capacity to govern. Some provinces begin to drift, not from rebellion, but from cultural divergence. The unity of Rome is tested not by swords, but by ideas. The idea that perhaps decentralization can coexist with imperial citizenship. Like all empires, the eternal Rome faces a new enemy: its success. In the 21st century of this alternate world, Rome has evolved into a federated empire. The Senate remains, but local governments wield true power. The emperor is a ceremonial figure, a unifier, not a ruler. The Pax Romana is a digital peace, maintained by networks, education, and shared values. Rome leads Earth's efforts to colonize Mars, establish interstellar communication, and combat universal challenges like climate change and artificial intelligence. Latin evolves into Neo-Latin, spoken by billions in varied dialects. Citizenship is global, rights are universal, and history is remembered, not as a fall, but as a continuous rise. In this world, humanity didn't need to rebuild from collapse. It never fell. And perhaps, just perhaps, the greatest empire of all time fulfilled its destiny, not to conquer the world, but to unite it. So next time you walk on a sidewalk, use indoor plumbing, or hear a legal phrase like habeas corpus, remember, Rome never truly died. But imagine if it had never needed to be reborn.